The morning Emily's life quietly shifted began like any other weekday in Seattle: gray sky, light rain, rushed footsteps, and a schedule she had followed for years without question. But something felt off from the moment she woke up, not bad, just unfamiliar, like the air was holding its breath, and as she hurried to the train station with her coat pulled tight, she told herself she was imagining things. Because that's what she always did when feelings tried to surface. Emily was 29. Independent, careful, and known among her friends as someone reliable and calm, someone who had learned to live without drama after love once slipped through her hands years ago in a quiet, mutual ending that left no scars on the outside but built walls inside her heart, walls she rarely admitted were there, not even to herself. And as she boarded the crowded train and found a seat by the window, she sank into her usual routine of staring outside and thinking about work deadlines, completely unaware that a simple moment was about to cut through that routine. The train jerked forward suddenly, and her coffee tipped dangerously, spilling a drop onto her sleeve, and before she could react, a steady hand reached out, firm but gentle, stopping the cup from falling, and a calm voice said, "Careful," and she looked up to see a man sitting across from her, his expression soft, not intrusive, not amused, just kind. And in that split second, something inside her shifted, not in a dramatic way but in a subtle, deep way that felt more frightening somehow, because it didn't demand attention, it simply took hold. He apologized even though it wasn't his fault, and she smiled awkwardly, brushing off the spill, noticing the quiet way he carried himself, the worn book in his hands, the way his eyes held focus without pressure. And they exchanged names, Michael and Emily, nothing more at first. But when the train slowed due to a delay, conversation filled the space naturally, not forced, not rushed, words flowing about ordinary things, work, weather, cities they had lived in, yet each sentence felt unexpectedly grounding to her, as if her mind had been waiting to rest somewhere safe. And she learned he had recently returned from Boston, starting over. A phrase that caught her attention because she had often felt stuck between who she was and who she might have been if she'd taken more risks. And Michael didn't speak like a man trying to impress, he spoke with honesty and pauses, as though each word mattered, and when he laughed, it wasn't loud, just warm enough to make her forget the noise around them. The train eventually reached her stop too soon, and Emily stood, feeling oddly unprepared to leave, surprised by the disappointment that stirred in her chest, a feeling she hadn't allowed in years. And Michael met her eyes and said, "Maybe I'll see you again," not as a promise, but as a possibility, and she nodded, stepping off the train with a polite smile, telling herself not to overthink it. Yet as she walked toward the exit, her heart beat faster than it had all morning, and she knew something had changed, not because of who Michael was exactly, but because of what she had felt in his presence, a quiet sense of curiosity mixed with comfort. Something she hadn't felt since she decided long ago that protecting herself mattered more than wanting more from life. And that day at work, she found herself distracted, replaying brief moments, the way his hand steadied her cup, the warmth in his voice, the brief pause before he spoke her name, moments that felt too small to matter and too strong to ignore. And for the first time in years, Emily questioned the rules she had built for herself, the ones that told her staying guarded was safest. Because something inside her wondered what it might feel like to step beyond them just once. And as evening came and the city lights reflected off rain-soaked streets, she realized that the real beginning wasn't meeting Michael, it was allowing herself to feel again. And though she didn't know where that feeling would lead, she knew one thing clearly as she boarded the train home: this was her first time in a long while sensing that a goodbye she hadn't even fully said yet might linger far longer than she expected. Emily started taking the same train at the same time every morning, telling herself it was only because the schedule worked better, but deep down she knew she was watching every face that entered the car. And on the fourth day, when she finally saw Michael again, standing near the door with his familiar calm expression, her heart reacted before her mind did, heat spreading through her chest in a way that surprised her. And when their eyes met and he smiled like he had expected her to be there, the world around them seemed to quiet, not disappear, just soften, and they spoke easily, as if the pause between meetings hadn't existed, sharing short updates about their days, laughing at small things, exchanging looks that lingered a second longer than necessary. And when the train stopped near a cafe by her office, Michael asked if she wanted to grab coffee, casual in tone but careful, giving her space to say no. Yet Emily said yes without hesitation, surprising herself with how natural it felt. their coffee turns became a routine, never rushed, never labeled, built around simple conversations and long walks where silence didn't feel empty. And Emily began to notice how Michael listened, truly listened, not just to statements but to meaning. How he remembered details and brought them back up later, making her feel seen in a quiet, grounding way, and slowly, without planning it, her days started to feel shaped by moments with him, mornings brighter, evenings calmer, as if life had found a gentler rhythm. And one evening by the waterfront when the sky burned orange and pink over the water, Emily realized she was smiling without effort, something she hadn't done freely in years, and that realization scared her more than loneliness ever had, because attachment meant risk, and risk meant opening doors she had sealed shut long ago. Michael never pushed her, never rushed what they were becoming, and that was exactly what allowed her walls to lower, brick by brick, as they shared stories about missed chances, old dreams, and fears they didn't usually voice. And Emily admitted she had built a life that felt safe but hollow, while Michael confessed he was searching for a place where he could belong without pretending. And in those shared truths, a quiet bond formed, strong because it wasn't demanded. And as weeks passed, Emily noticed she waited for his messages, not anxiously but with anticipation, noticed how his presence made her want to be more open, more honest, and that scared her because good things had a way of ending when she let herself believe in them. And one night as they sat together watching city lights dance on the water, Michael asked softly what she was thinking, and she answered truthfully, without rehearsing, saying that good things rarely stayed, expecting him to reassure or deny it, but instead he simply said that sometimes they stayed long enough to change us. And that answer settled deep inside her, because it wasn't a promise, it was understanding. And in that moment, Emily realized something had shifted beyond friendship, beyond hesitation, into a space she never planned to reach again. A space where hope lived quietly, not demanding certainty, just asking to exist. And as she walked home later that night, her steps light despite the fear sitting beside her, she understood that this was her first time in years allowing herself to want more than safety, her first time accepting that even if a story didn't last forever, the feeling could still be worth the risk. And though she had no idea what tomorrow would bring, she knew she had crossed a line she could not undo, choosing to feel instead of hide, choosing connection over control. And that decision, silent yet powerful, would soon test her in ways she had never faced before. The change did not arrive like a storm or an argument but like a quiet shift Emily felt before she could explain it, a pause in replies that once came quickly, a softness in Michael's voice that now carried restraint. And though he still smiled the same way and listened just as carefully, something unseen had stepped between them, and Emily sensed it during walks that stretched a little longer in silence and messages that ended sooner than before. And she tried not to read too deeply into it because she had promised herself she would not cling, yet feelings do not follow rules, and the more she tried to stay calm, the more her chest tightened with questions she was afraid to ask. Michael, on the other hand, seemed torn, as if carrying a weight he had not yet placed down, and his laughter came with a delay, his thoughts drifting even while he stood beside her. And Emily noticed everything, because when you care, awareness sharpens. And one evening after days of carrying this tension, Michael asked her to walk with him after dinner, his tone gentle but serious, and as they moved through the city streets under glowing lights, Emily knew instinctively that something important was coming, something that would not pass quietly. And when they reached a quiet corner near the water, Michael stopped walking, turned to her, and spoke slowly, choosing each word with care, and said he had been offered a job, a real one, a strong opportunity in Chicago, the kind people didn't turn down. And the word landed between them with quiet force, not loud enough to shock the world but heavy enough to shift theirs. Emily felt her breath catch, not because she was angry or betrayed, but because she had allowed herself to imagine mornings and evenings with him nearby, small futures she never named out loud, and now she saw them fading. And even so, she told him he should take it, because part of loving someone was not asking them to shrink their life for your comfort. And Michael looked at her with gratitude mixed with pain, admitting he hadn't planned any of this, hadn't meant to grow close, but closeness has its own timing, and he did not want to hurt her. Yet Emily understood that not choosing was also a choice, and that some endings came without blame. After that night, everything became tender and bittersweet, every meeting layered with awareness, every laugh edged with knowing, and they continued seeing each other, not out of denial but out of respect for what they shared, choosing honesty over distance while time still belonged to them, and Emily found herself memorizing small details, the warmth of his hands on cold evenings, the way his voice softened when he said her name, the calm she felt just sitting beside him, because part of her sensed these moments were becoming memories even as they happened, and Michael tried to stay present, but his mind often drifted ahead to a city he had not yet left for, a life that pulled at him with promise and fear, and sometimes Emily caught him watching her quietly, as if committing her to memory too. There were no dramatic fights or regrets spoken in anger, only long talks filled with vulnerability, where Emily admitted she had once chosen safety over love because losing felt unbearable, and Michael admitted he had spent years running from places and people, afraid of staying too long anywhere, and in sharing these truths, they felt closer than ever, even as the distance ahead grew clearer, and this closeness made the coming separation harder, not easier, because it showed them what they were about to lose. The night before Michael's departure, they walked the same route they always had, city lights reflecting on wet pavement, everything familiar yet fragile, and they spoke about ordinary things on purpose, resisting heavy words, because sometimes holding on to normal felt like control, but in the pauses between sentences, Emily felt grief forming, quiet but deep, and when Michael finally told her he had packed his bags, she nodded, knowing the moment had arrived no matter how gently they had approached it, and she realized that this was her first time allowing herself to feel loss without shutting down, without anger, without pretending it didn't matter. That night, when she returned home alone, Emily cried, not loudly, not in despair, but with an honesty that surprised her, because she wasn't just mourning Michael, she was mourning the version of herself that had just begun to believe in possibility, and yet beneath that sadness, something else existed, something strong, because she knew she had not lost herself in loving him, she had discovered herself, and even as uncertainty stretched ahead, Emily understood this part of her story was not about regret or failure, but about learning that love could be real even when it did not stay, and that realization would carry her through the goodbye she could no longer delay. The final morning arrived without ceremony, gray and quiet, as if the city itself understood what was about to end, and Emily moved through her apartment slowly, touching familiar things with a strange awareness, knowing this day would mark a clear line between before and after, and when she reached the train station, the air felt colder though it was no different from any other morning, and she spotted Michael near the platform with a single suitcase beside him, standing tall but still, as if he were gathering strength rather than waiting for a train, and when their eyes met, there was no surprise, only recognition, the shared understanding that this was the moment they had both been approaching with careful steps, and they stood together without rushing, speaking softly about small details, his flight time, her work schedule, because large words felt too heavy to carry, and Emily noticed how calm Michael tried to be, yet his hands tightened slightly around the handle of the suitcase, revealing the cost of leaving, and when he finally thanked her for what they had shared, for the calm she brought into his life during a time of uncertainty, Emily felt tears rise but held her expression steady, telling him he had reminded her that her heart could still open without breaking her apart, and their words were simple but honest, shaped by respect rather than sorrow, and when the train announcement broke the air, something inside Emily steadied, because she knew that clinging would only turn a meaningful ending into a painful one, and she chose to let the moment remain clean and human. Their goodbye was quiet, a gentle embrace without desperation. A pause long enough to speak everything they hadn't said aloud, and when Michael stepped onto the train and turned back once more, Emily smiled, not bravely, but truthfully, because love didn't always require permanence to be real, and as the train pulled away, she remained on the platform, breathing slowly, letting the ache wash through her rather than resisting it, and for the first time, she did not feel afraid of being alone, because she understood that connection had not taken anything from her, it had added depth to her life. In the weeks that followed, Emily returned to her routines, but they no longer felt empty. She took the same train, walked the same streets, and lived the same life on the surface, yet something inside her had shifted, and she found herself more open to people, more present in conversations, less guarded against possibility, and sometimes Michael crossed her mind, not with pain but with gratitude, as a chapter that had taught her that love could arrive quietly and leave with dignity. And one morning as sunlight filled the train car and softened the reflections in the windows, Emily realized that this was her first time understanding goodbye not as loss but as transformation, the first time recognizing that an ending could still shape her future in a healthy way, and she stepped off the train lighter than she had before, holding space for what had been while remaining open to what might come, knowing that some connections are meant not to stay, but to prepare us for who we are becoming, and with that acceptance settled in her heart, Emily walked forward, no longer afraid of beginnings or endings, ready to meet life without retreating from it again.